everyone, and welcome back to the Whale Nerds podcast. This is episode number 118. My name is Slater, and I'm here with Adam and Caitlin.
What's up?
Hello, and we have a special guest this week. We have Ted Cheeseman back on. Ted has been a previous guest on our podcast where we talked to him about Happy Whale, but Ted is also part of the family who established and runs Cheeseman's Ecology Safaris, and we are very excited to talk with Ted more about his guiding experiences around the world, but especially around the southern continent, because that's who we're going to Antarctica with this winter, and we're super excited for the trip. So, hi, Ted.
Thank you. Yeah, awesome.
So I guess let's just kind of start with like a little bit of the history of how Cheeseman's came to be. I don't know if we really talked about that in the other episode we had you on.
I don't recall, but yeah, so my dad was a zoology professor, rest in peace. My dad passed away in March. He and my mom passed away in November last year, so it's been kind of a year, but
tough year, yeah.
Yeah, but it was just like, for them, it was like just drawn to, I think both had a serious love of the wilds. I think my mom was attracted to my dad. Her favorite story was that he was the only guy she'd ever met with a bird book. He was from Hawaii. She met him in New Hampshire. She was from like small town New Hampshire, and definitely had to like, let's get out of town. And so they traveled a ton. And then my father was a zoology professor, but so he had at a teaching college and had summers free. So they started guiding a bit in like California, whale watching in the mid 70s, when like we didn't have summer whale watching. We only had gray whales. Like that was it. It was only gray whales back then. And then they started doing some Baja trips and then Africa trips. And then they started their own company. And in the early 80s, my dad got asked to guide to join as expedition staff on a trip to Antarctica. I was 1984. Yeah. So I was 10 years old when he was preparing for this, and he was so stressed about it. There were all these big name naturalists, and he was just like, oh, little old me, I'm just a community college teacher. And he just prepared and prepared. So I was watching all these, slideshows about emperor penguins, and he was like making slides out of books and getting them from whoever he could get pictures of Antarctica from, and all this. And he had a really, really good time, other than apparently being seasick. It was a 40-something day trip from Punta Arenas to Tasmania. So they went all the way down the peninsula and around semi-circumnavigation up the subantarctic islands after the Ross Sea and up to Australia, and just super formative for him. And as it turns out, kind of like pretty formative for me too, just because it was like this intense burst of Antarctic ecology when I was 10 years old. And then 8 years on, my parents both guided for a season for another company. And while they were down there, they're like, man, we should do this ourselves. So in 1994, we chartered a ship. And it was by far Cheeseman's Ecology Safaris has always been a really small, like, our focus is on wildlife experiences. Definitely not ever, it's so not the tour company that you like build it up and sell it, or build it and make it into something. It's like quality, small, keep it focused. So we did the biggest tour we'd ever done, group of 80 something people, and it was just so stressful, but it was awesome. It was really awesome. And it was kind of the like halfway through, like, whoa, this is working. Like, we're not all gonna die, let's do it again. And so, we kind of did Antarctic trips every other year for a number of years, and then it's kind of gotten to be, so I was always determined to be like, oh yeah, the Family Wildlife Safari Company was so cool, but I'm going to go be a scientist. And but Antarctica kept kind of pulling me back into the tour company, and then yeah, until finally finding a way to merge the two and doing whale science, very much supported by the platform of the ship. So yeah, I mean, our thing has always been like, at most, really kind of like one trip at a time. This season we're doing a Falkland, South Georgia, Antarctic Peninsula trip in October, November, and then this Antarctic Peninsula whale focus trip February, March. So it's like, instead of like trip, you know, turn it around, it's like really focus on this. Staff is super engaged in this. And yeah, it's that like total wildlife immersion plan.
That's what we love. That's awesome. It's so it sounds like you got your passion for wildlife from your parents. I'm kind of the same way.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh,
it's
right.
cool that they were able to propagate that for you. So
Oh, I mean, so much so. It's yeah, yeah, big time. All from the folks.
cool.
So when you have guests kind of like getting prepared to go to Antarctica, I guess, how do you frame expectations? Like, what do you tell them they can expect to experience or see, or, you know?
Good question. You know, it's such a funny thing. I love it when people show up kind of without expectations.
They're under promise and over deliver.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the ideal, right? You just like, in, you know, in the without expectations, just because it's so hard to conceive of. Like our concept of Antarctica is formed by what, you know, like the media we get, which, I mean, it's shifted a lot. You know, when we first started going there, it was like no one had ever heard of anyone that goes to Antarctica. And then
Yeah.
and now it's like, oh yeah, my grandma went there last winter on a cruise ship, you know, and like, okay. But, you know, like, oh, you know, aren't you gonna die at sea? Or, oh, isn't it like just seasickness? Or, you know, man, I don't have a down jacket massive enough for that. And I'm like, you go skiing ever? Because
Yeah.
it's not any colder than that, right? I mean,
there you go.
you know, which, I mean, and I wouldn't expect folks to understand, but the other part is like the parts of it that just move me so much are the things that is, you know, like the silence, right? When we're out in a Zodiac and you cut the engine and the only sound is the popping of ice from all the bergy bits and brash ice and bergs in the water, and then a whale comes up, and you know that
Yeah.
feeling, right?
Ugh,
It's super quiet
awesome.
and a whale comes up alongside of you. So I don't know. I don't really tell. I don't. I try to kind of almost avoid that conversation of like, oh, what should I expect? Expect to have an awesome time, you know, come with an open mind.
Yeah.
Expect
Yeah.
to
That's
Yeah.
kind of where I go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come with an open mind. That's a good way to put it. We're definitely going to see ice, and everything else is a bonus.
Yeah, you know, something that I want to hear about is the crossing, because I've that's probably been my biggest question so far, is like,
Sure.
what about the crossing? Because people seem to really be afraid of crossing the
Right.
Drake, right?
Okay, first thing about the crossing is that's the most wildlife diversity of the trip,
Yeah.
right? Opportunity to
true.
see right out of the gate, like as we leave Ushuaia, you know, Magellanic penguins in the water, hourglass dolphins, you know,
Ooh.
dusky dolphin, you know, it's like albatross straight away out into the mouth of the Beagle Channel, sei whales out into the open waters, wandering albatross, sperm whale, blue
Wow.
whale, fin whale. Hey, type D killer whales. Like, how insane would that
Yeah.
be, right?
Have you
Not
seen
that I've
them?
ever seen one, but no, I
You
have
haven't?
not.
Okay.
And I have not. But they're there. They are
Yeah,
there.
the
there.
whale nerds,
They're definitely there.
collab will be the time.
Bring it on. Yeah, we'll
Gotta
just
get the
chum with
right
one of you hanging
energy
behind
on
the
the
boat.
boat.
And, yeah, exactly.
Oh, I'm down as volunteer. I'll volunteer as tribute.
chum. Awesome.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, we're doing polar plunge now. I'm in.
Yeah, exactly. So it is the place with the most species diversity for sure.
Mhm.
What's the Drake like? I mean, it could be gosh, a couple of years ago. Well, this was pre-COVID, so yeah, a few years ago now. But my last crossing pre-COVID, it literally was so flat it was like all the albatross were sitting on the water, or they
Wow.
had just like avoided this windless, waveless zone. They'd stayed east or west. You get a little local high pressure, it just goes flat. Or the most beautiful is when you have these big, long rolling swells. It can be fearsome, full, no, like no doubt it can be
Yeah.
brutal. The average day is just like, if you're susceptible to seasickness, take seasickness meds, and you bounce along and it's all good. We're in the Drake for basically 2 nights and a day, and then we're on the peninsula. And once we're on the peninsula, for the most part, we're in super protected waters. So yeah, it's like kind of a scary part of it, but that's what drugs are for, I mean, like,
That's what I've
It-
said to people. I said, there's no shame in taking motion sickness medicine.
right. I
I'd
mean,
rather not feel bad and take it.
Yeah.
there's a higher percentage of the people on your average whale watch trip in Monterey Bay that are sick than on that ocean crossing. It's because you come prepared for it. You come mentally prepared. I mean, yeah, you're like, well, let's go whale watching tomorrow and let's go drinking tonight. Yeah, you're going to be seasick the next day,
Yeah.
right? When you're like, oh, we're going to be in the Drake tomorrow. Maybe we shouldn't have that extra,
Margarita.
shot or whatever the night before. I feel like that's kind of the equation there is, yeah.
And the worst thing that happens, you just go to sleep and you wake up
Yeah.
in a beautiful place,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I tell people too, like when I used to work those long extended trips, 8-hour, 12-hour trips, I'd be like, take a nap. If you're seasick, just sleep it off. And usually people come out of it fine after they've slept for a little while.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, sleep is a great weapon again, and you knock yourself down, stay asleep, take some seasickness meds. Pretty soon we're approaching the South Shetland Islands, and it's like
Crazy.
that's another, that whole,
Yeah.
I mean, your podcast about the fin whales, that
Yeah.
zone approaching the South Shetland Islands just across, and you were totally spot on. Like, yeah, there's these big concentration of fin whales around the Elephant Island, but they weren't hunted there because that same concentrations, you get them to some extent around the Shetlands, in the Bransfield Strait just south of the Shetlands, and probably there's heavy interchange. Probably those whales were mostly killed there and depleted from the waters east. So to me, like, the shame is when it's big weather in the Drake. One part, yeah, it makes life more difficult. Another part, it makes, obviously it makes people seasick. But the big thing is, once it's above about 20 knots of wind, you just don't see a lot of wildlife, and that's a shame because it's such a great opportunity there. Yeah. So,
Well, they don't call it the Roaring 40s and the Furious 50s for nothing, I guess.
yeah. And so, yeah, it is definitely not unusual that it's solid conditions, right? But it's also not that unusual that it's like, wait, didn't they say this was a big dangerous ocean? And your average day is somewhere in between, right? So
Yeah. Well,
Might
it's
just
gonna
get that
be
day
what
where
it's gonna
it's-
be.
I mean, it could just be glassy the whole way across.
it
Never
could.
know.
Yeah.
Never know. So
Yeah.
when did you so you grew up in Cheeseman's and your parents gave you a lot of inspiration and helped you propagate that love for nature. And you left, right? You went to college, you did your thing, but you came back, right? So when did you start leading trips to Antarctica again as a guide?
I joined our. We don't do this anymore. I literally learned to drive a Zodiac in Antarctica, right?
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. How many people in the world can say that?
like my dad, I have it in my shed. We have this little Mark II, I think it's from 1971, 1972.
Wow.
Mark II Zodiac, right? Drove it around like as a little kid. we'd cruise up Elkhorn Slough. He's taking the students out,
That's
and
cool.
he'd take the students out up in Elkhorn Slough and all this stuff, and you know, drove that around, did a couple like stern landings, like literally I think it was 2 days, and then it was like, you know, in Antarctica, and it was just like, oh yeah, passengers straight in. And I'm like, oh yeah, it'll be fine. You know, we don't. It was total cowboy style back then, you know. And nowadays we're like, okay, I know you have a captain's license. All right, ready for your checkout drive? Like, we're gonna go drive the boat before we see, you know, like, okay, cool, you know, maybe. And you know, when you guys are down there, we have full confidence in your ability to drive, but we're not just gonna toss you in the boat with, okay, off you go with gas, right? But yeah, no, 1994 was the first Cheeseman's ecology trip down there, and I was
You're a guide.
basically just a, yeah, I mean, I was more or less just expedition staff. Like, you know, I studied up, but we didn't really. There were quite a few solid experts, and I was basically part of the crew, landing team, all that sort of stuff. And then from there, you know, kind of started. So in 2007 was the first time I was full expedition leader. And
Cool.
since then, you know, in various forms, I've usually been expedition leader when I've been aboard. Nowadays, quite frankly, just as often I'm going as like a guest scientist, and I love that because it's
That's
just
cool.
like, oh, that's a huge problem. All right, I'll be on the bridge.
Not my problem.
But you know, but the expedition leading is rad because you're like, hey, here's an opportunity to get, you know, out in the field more, or like, oh, with these weather patterns, I bet if we
Yeah.
tuck over there, we can actually get out and operate instead of sit here and twiddle our thumbs, you know, or having a real sense. I mean, and that's been the fun thing, is watching the change over the years. And God, you know, it used to be that a whale experience on the Antarctic Peninsula was like a one per trip, and now it's like, yeah, now we slow down the ships because the expectation is that if we operate at full speed, there's a very high and likely chance of whale endangerment, right? So we have this
Yeah.
whole scheme of reducing speed to reduce the risk of ship strikes, which I think is awesome. Yeah,
Nice.
it's good.
So what is it like for you to take people to Antarctica? Like personally, like what do you enjoy the most about being an expedition leader, or if you're a scientist on board, like what is it for you?
That's a good question. I mean, it's really easy to get caught up in the operation, right? So here I am, like, oh, you know, okay, I've got, you know, 6 p.m., 6:30 p.m. last boat back aboard, and oh yeah, we gotta, you know, pull anchor and wonder what the ice conditions are like down there. Oh, is that storm coming in? And like, I'll really get caught up in the, you know, the expedition details or whatever, and then, you know, and then you see someone who's like, you have a quiet moment, and you see someone who's just, it's a little bit cliche, but it's kind of my favorite thing, is someone who's drawn to tears by the beauty of it. And I'm like, stop and realize that is an experience that I first had nearly 30 years ago. And it's like, there's a certain flood of emotions that comes back vicariously. And if I, you know, if I can be a part of making that real, making it possible for someone to experience this environment in a way that's just like, it's just genuine and special. And you know, it's really easy. I mean, we go with 100 passengers, 100 guests, right? So it's really easy, if you don't, as an expedition leader, pay a lot of attention
Pay
to it.
attention.
It's right. It's really easy to just kind of have this like mass, 100 people is not mass tourism, but it can lean that way, right? Everybody on the boat. Okay, everybody off. Okay, yeah, you here in group A and group B. But if you stop and step back and you like really, and this is something that we talk about a ton as expedition staff, is like, look, we are here to make that special moment possible. And putting an extra effort into that, really, to me, that's why I go. That's like, I am very unlikely to see something on this trip that I've never seen. Like, I probably
Mhm.
won't see a new species. I probably will see behaviors I haven't seen before. I'll probably
Yep.
see density of whales or distribution that's different. I will learn a lot, but the incremental, like it's like my 30-somethingth trip south, right? So really it's like being open to the experience of the people that are traveling. That's what's awesome, honestly. It's so cool to see someone just moved by it.
I think that's why all of us do what we do.
Yeah, I think I was
Yeah.
about to say that.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
like snorkel trips to me are always so stressful. But when you watch someone put their face in the water and then come up and go, "Oh my gosh," that's I'm like sitting there lifeguarding, going, "Yeah, that's why we take them
that's
out
why.
here."
That's why. Yeah.
Like
Totally. Right.
today, all three of my passengers were at the front of my boat, and two humpbacks came right across the front, lifted his tail up right in front, and then just like lightly slapped it down. And hearing all of them say, "Oh my God," like in sync, and like just, and then, just right after that, we saw huge sunfish, and they were just like mind blown because it's such
Nice.
an awkward fish, and it was all three of them. So, yeah, those experiences
That's
are really
rad.
amazing.
Well, and it's such a trip because, I mean, Antarctica is special that way, but quite frankly, like whales, you have that experience where you're taking people into a space that's well outside of, many of us have gone whale watching so many times,
Yeah.
but for the first time whale watcher, it's just like, wait, I'm
was
I'm
happening?
right. It's
Yeah.
inconceivable, and I love that. It's that like your neural network doesn't have a way to process something at this
Yeah.
scale,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, that's rad.
Well, I can almost guarantee you're gonna watch me bawl my eyes out. So
Well,
pay close attention.
you'll always know where Adam is because you will be able to hear him no matter
The
where we
whales
are.
will know where
Across
Adam
across the
is.
Southern Ocean.
You will never lose Adam's Zodiac because he will just be yelling all the time.
Okay.
Like, just turn your radio off, Adam. Just call us from the boat. What is the timing for wildlife like throughout the summer in Antarctica?
Sure, good question. Okay, so yeah, I mean, Antarctica is a hyper seasonal place, right? I mean, every place has its seasonal changes, but the extremes, that continent triples in area with expansion of ice. Antarctic Peninsula is far less so in terms of extreme seasonality, right? So any other part of the Antarctic coast, you literally have hundreds of miles of sea ice that in some cases broken in by polynyas, but mostly it's like maybe the ice pack will break up to near the physical, continental coast, and then refreeze far out. So like emperor penguins, Adelie penguins that nest along the further southern coast, they have this really short breeding season. But the peninsula, there are parts of the peninsula that will be open year round. You get pack ice that comes in and goes, and bits of open water that come in and go and such. So there's wildlife there year round, but first off, all of the wildlife is marine, right? In terms of terrestrial wildlife, you've got two insect species, and they are they are very small. Like neither of them are much more than a millimeter, and they are mostly concentrated around penguin colonies, like living and hanging out in pools and puddles and streams that are fed, literally fertilized by penguin guano. So it is a hypermarine environment, right? And that marine environment is dominated by sea ice. So sea ice comes in, it goes out, it's super dynamic. Generally, you get, on the Antarctic Peninsula, it'll freeze up out in and around the Shetland Islands, but it'll break up and shift around a lot. August, September is the extent of the sea ice, and then it starts breaking up pretty quickly. So February, when we're going, is the beginning of it's basically late summer, beginning of autumn, which is the peak of the whale season. In fact, numbers wise, the peak of the whale season is a little bit later, probably, but we end up with very little data further on into the season. So, I'm just basically going from, and it's a little bit of speculation and extension of numbers, because like the numbers we have start to drop off heavily in March and such. But historically, this was considered the end of the season. To me, it's like the heart of that February March season is kind of my favorite, because the number of vessels starts to back down, but the number of whales is still actually climbing. You still have long days, but you don't have in like I've done trips down in later March, and the numbers of whales are ridiculous, but maybe it's only 10% more whales than we will see, but the days are so much shorter. That's a bit of a challenge. So
Yeah.
Gotcha.
so yeah, so you get this like penguins come in and they're starting to establish nests. Gentoos first. Adelies have the most, because they're kind of tuned to further south. They have this really truncated season. The Gentoos will come in and find nesting sites. So December, they're laying eggs, hatching, chicks are rearing. By the time we're there in February, chicks are away from nest sites. Some are still being fed by mom and dad, but they're crashing, they're chasing after mom and dad, and they're molting and starting to fledge, go out to sea. Seals have, depends on the species, quite a bit of different seasonality. Whales tend to come down to the peninsula later, such that like our ship strike risk reduction scheme starts January 1st. Before then, yeah, there's whales in the peninsula, but the numbers are not huge. So whale season kind of, I feel like it really starts in January. February is it's a little bit like January is to Monterey. January in Antarctica is to Monterey Bay, say maybe like, I don't know, I guess I'd say, well, nowadays, I guess I'd say it's like March, but April-ish, February, March are like those big influx of numbers. I guess it feels like we have a little dip around June and some, but there I feel like it's more of this truncated classic peak, and then it's maybe stretching on out into May, and there's some various dynamics going on there, but and then once you get past April, March will be the minimum of sea ice, and then it starts getting cold enough that ice starts coming, sea ice starts freezing again, right?
Nice.
Yeah.
Can't wait to have. I don't care if I just get one whale ID'd in Antarctica, and it better have a match, Ted.
He wants it on his happy whale.
Okay.
Well, I have one in Iceland and one in Antarctica. I need one in Greenland, though. I feel like.
Oh, jeez.
Imagine I match a whale from Iceland and Antarctica.
That would be crazy. That'd be way too crazy.
The longest migration.
I mean, I guess some of them do cross the equator if they really do go to Costa Rica, but
they definitely cross the equator. But think about that. So you got the Humboldt current coming out from South America, right? So they're migrating to a water temperature.
Yeah.
And to get to that water temperature they got from Antarctica along the west coast of South America, they got to keep going.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas our whales, California whales, we're just like, oh, look, Vallarta, awesome. It's warm enough. Some of them keep going to Costa Rica or whatever. But yeah, you definitely get, some whales that go that far north to Nicaragua. But for the most part, we have not in Happy Whale had a single true like change hemasphere whale. And not yet. Obviously it has happened, right? I mean, there's same species. There's no, but
I wonder if our California population or this population is the like where the water temperature changes the least between their migration.
Well, there's the Indian Ocean or the Arabian Sea humpbacks. They don't really hardly move at all. They
You know what I
like
mean?
breed and
Like,
feed in the
it's
same
not
place.
that much warmer down, south.
Yeah.
I guess it is compared to Monterey. It's only 55 here, so I guess it does get.
Yeah. So if it
but
gets to
still,
70 there.
Yeah, it's 15 degrees.
For a migratory population, you might be right. So, I mean, the whole argument that the whales migrate for skin condition because the water is too cold for them to regenerate their skin. It's pretty clear. I think it's a great argument for Antarctica.
Yeah.
Kind of California to coastal Mexico. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I wear a 5'4" wetsuit here, so
Yeah,
it
and
is
we
still
have
cold.
we have humpbacks here all winter, right?
Yeah.
Like we were
Well,
seeing BC whales in the winter, and we were seeing all sorts of stuff. So like, did they even go all the way down?
yeah, who knows?
Well, yeah, do they all migrate? I mean, and I don't know what the Vernadsky station's fate's going to be. I mean, right now sorry, a little context. There is a Ukrainian base on the Antarctic Peninsula, which
Oh.
probably it is right around what will probably be our southernmost point on this trip. Might stop in and say hello. The lead of their whale research just got a Fulbright fellowship, and she's here. Super awesome person, Oksana Savenko. I think she was the first woman to overwinter at that station, which probably was a fairly intense experience. And so, yeah, anyhow, she's here at UC Santa Cruz for a year.
Oh, cool.
And because they're there year round, they've collected a lot of images from and biopsies and such during kind of what we consider the off season. And they've had whales through, like, I don't know, I think I want to say June even. So, but around, I mean, Southeast Alaska, Sitka Sound has January big numbers of whales. So, I'm really curious to push into the Happy Well data to see, can we see some consistent patterns, right? Obviously, a lot of the whales are leaving in September from here. Obviously, a lot of the whales are showing up in Antarctica in, late December, January, and presumably migrating north and, leaving in May, June, migrating up to West Coast South America, some of them to Oceania and such. But like that pattern, do some of them not migrate, or is it just out of sync, or like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think
Curious
especially
stuff.
as populations grow, the out of sync overlap thing's going to be a lot more common, where like the early whales are already
Mhm.
back and the late whales are just leaving, and so there's always some around.
Yeah.
We'll find out. That's the cool
We
thing.
will find out.
It's the cool thing about the internet. We all like share information with each other about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's a cool thing. I mean, and I point out, like in this case, that it's the Ukrainian station, right? I mean, these folks are under serious duress and yet keeping on with their research. They're just freaking heroic to me. But
Yeah.
but yeah, these are things we couldn't find out alone. And that's, I mean, bringing science aboard our ships, I mean, our voyage will be kind of a standout in terms of the numbers, but we're getting, all of, I don't think there's any Antarctic tour operation that isn't to some extent participating in citizen science. And I guess the reality is, even if the staff don't, the
Isn't the
information is
people,
out there enough that some of the passengers will always hear about it, but it's really actively promoted. We all operate under the auspices of the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators. Like, we all follow a set of rules that actively encourages education and engagement in science. And as a result, we're getting images from across all the vessels, and it's just amazing what that collective force can do, quite frankly. So yeah.
So,
we
oh, go ahead.
yeah. No, I was just going to say that we're finding matches to about 50% of the whales that we photographed down there.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
So
That's
getting there.
pretty good considering
Yeah.
how remote it really is,
Totally.
And how many?
and
there
how
are.
many different breeding grounds those whales come
Yeah.
from.
And what is the most? Where are you seeing the most whales come? Like what breeding ground?
It's so-called stock G, west coast of South America.
Okay.
Yeah, there's like, and it's pretty way more focused than like say, well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess you'd say like California's like three quarters Mexico and one quarter goes down to Central America. But I mean, I feel like feeding areas tend to have a pretty strong, feeding areas, the whales go to one, maybe two breeding grounds there. The feeding area, almost all those whales are going to West Coast South America. Less than 1% seems to go to Brazil, which is kind of curious because it's not a big right turn to go up the east coast
Yeah.
of South America.
Yeah.
And then a few percent go way out west to Oceania. And I'm super curious because that is a population that potentially is still endangered. And what the dynamics are, like which whales go and when are they feeding on the peninsula, and are they potentially more susceptible to disturbance from krill fishing and such. Yeah, kind of some interesting questions in there, which honestly one of the things Oksana's looking at while she's here. So yeah,
That's so
Nice.
cool. It I feel like it takes like one whale to really tell a story like that. Like I feel like Big Mama in the Pacific Northwest, like it took one whale to tell that story, and that's such an interesting dynamic between Oceania and the Antarctic Peninsula. I feel like it would just be like one whale to really solve a mystery or to even get the word out there.
Yeah,
Totally.
cool. It can be a good hook too, for it's like the one whale sighted between the two, like that in and of itself might be an anecdote, but there's an underlying story there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about that partial birth encounter in Maui, that where they got footage of it, and then 6 weeks later she had a calf. Well, that's a Russian humpback.
Yeah.
And then that season we all started looking at happy whale and we're like, wow, a lot more whales come from Russia than any of us ever realized. And I don't think we would have really paid that much attention to it unless we had known that she was the Russian whale. Pretty
About
cool.
7% of Hawaii whales.
There he goes.
Actually. Preliminary.
Way more
Do
than
not
people
quote me on
realize.
that.
Preliminary.
No, I'm literally making my talk right now for the Marine Mammal Conference. Totally tardy.
Are you doing virtual presentation?
I was gonna go in person. I was gonna be leaving tomorrow for the Arctic. I was gonna go hang out for a week with beluga whales.
Oh
and
man.
then go straight from there to the Marine Mammal Conference. And then I broke my darn clavicle, and I'm like, I can't go.
Too much
do
jostling
anything.
on a plane for you.
I know.
Darn.
Oh, you
So-
need to go see belugas.
That'll be our
it's
next one.
such a cool trip. But yeah.
Well, see, I love
that.
that you can you can even see Ted glow up about these animals, and you've been doing it forever.
How many times? have you done the belugas?
trip.
Jaded. No way. No, I mean, I seriously, I don't get drawn to tears in Antarctica, but I tell you what, I'll just bust out laughing, because it's just like, how do you, I mean, when you're surrounded by icebergs and a whale's like, hey, what's up? Snuggles up to your boat or whatever. Like, yeah, it's like, it's the best thing ever. And it's like, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. No, not
So
jaded.
cool.
Not jaded. Yep.
So I have some kind of more like logistic questions about Antarctica for folks. So the three of us are going as part of the expedition team, but we have some pretty incredible people also coming with us. I don't know if you wanted to just share kind of the cast of characters for a couple minutes of who else is joining as staff.
Oh gosh. Where to even start? I love our expedition team. I feel so incredibly fortunate to work with this. Just like, okay, so here's the thing. We do one trip. And so our staff almost exclusively comes for the one trip. So it's just like start the trip with 100% energy and go, 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 as opposed to like, okay, all right, off you go. Next trip, turn it around and it's not to say that other trips that repeat are bad per se, but yeah, ours is better. Okay, so there's you guys. Boom, the whale nerds, epic. This trip was conceived in part with Mark Carwardine. So where's my book? Author of this here book, my favorite marine mammal guidebook. This is,
Nice.
yeah. He's going to be aboard with a filmmaker buddy of his, so we'll end up with a pretty cool little ship voyage documentary. We've got professional photographer Scott Davis, longtime leader for Cheeseman's Ecology Safaris. He's just really awesome photographer, and while there, his whole thing is just like how to help you make your own better images. My assistant expedition leader, Hugh Rose, has guided in Alaska for years and years and years. He's a pilot. He's just one of these people that's it's like, this is broken. Hugh, fix anything, but deeply knowledgeable, just deeply knowledgeable. Hugh and I were poring over charts, kind of plotting out what we think our ideal itinerary should be, just going, okay, Drake Passage, crossing, Shetland Islands, where do we want to start? What, site by site, what are our options? What are, this whole thing. I mean, we start planning that long in advance. Got a good cast of Alaskans as well, folks that kind of network through Hugh, just super solid folks. In terms of knowledge of birds, a fellow named Joe Kaplan, who's a loon biologist and seabirder, which it's just a cool space to be up on the bridge or in the observation lounge or bridge wings with Joe. Like, yeah, it's not just albatross, it's prions and petrels, and I mean such a diversity of seabirds. Meryl Daliboo, I think I don't even know, Daliboo, I think she's Australian. I had a funny experience when Meryl was like she had heard about our trips and was trying to get us to hire her, and she sent me this CV. I'm looking through, I'm like, anyone with this much qualification, there must be something wrong with them. I literally, and so I was kind of like, I don't know. I mean, she just seems overqualified for, like, but is she fun to be with? And then I sort of talked around with some other expedition guides and got a good thumbs up. So she's joined us, Sal, for a few years. She's right now, I think she's guiding hiking trips in Chamonix. But Australian, incredibly capable. I think she said like, oh yeah, I'm studying to be a submarine pilot, but I can fit those those courses around. I can still fit this trip in around that.
Wow.
Just super diverse staff. Allie Little is going to be kind of, along with Hugh, assistant expedition leader. I'm pretty sure it's going to work out for her to join. She's often expedition leader on the ship Plancia, so in essence, I'm kind of displacing her. But some folks get an ego trip about that. She was super amped. She actually contacted me, I don't know, must have been 8 months ago, saying like, hey, yeah, so any chance I could join your trip? And I was super delighted because she was a longtime naturalist and worked for a conservation group in the Falkland Islands, and we got to know each other a bit. And her first Antarctic endeavor was as basically a junior staff with us. So now she's expedition leader and joining, and it's just cool. I mean, honestly, I really go for like the the no ego, all fun, all there for our group, diverse staff, so that we have capacity and enthusiasm and energy. That's kind of like my collective goal, is like knowledge, capacity, enthusiasm, and energy.
Well, it sounds like you got it. It's pretty diverse staff, like you were saying. We're excited to be a part of it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like we're gonna have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it'll be good. So
How many spots are left on the trip? Do you know offhand?
we're a little past half full, which quite frankly is a little weird. Like, we're usually full with something like this, but it's just, I don't know, hard to predict the world these days.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there's still totally room, and cabin choice, and some cabin types are not around anymore, but there's room. Yeah.
What's one of the benefits of going on a smaller ship to Antarctica?
Oh my God.
I
Good question.
I knew you were gonna get hyped.
Yeah, no, I mean, I will not leave on a larger ship, right? Because once you have more than 100 guests aboard, not everyone can be ashore at the same time. And they say, oh, well, no, if I want, yeah, lots of people just like to go out for a little bit, and then you have tons of time. And you're like, yeah, right, okay. So what about when the weather changes and it's not your shift to go out with the first batch of folks? Oh, I'm sorry, folks. Yeah, landing's canceled for, any further landings
Yeah.
canceled. Oh, I didn't get to go. Bummer. And
Bummer. Yeah.
it's just, yeah. And, that's cool. If your goal in going to Antarctica is like, stand on the continent, get your picture taken with a penguin, okay, cool. But if your goal is like, let's experience the place, let's get there, let's have the full deal, you cannot go on a ship with more than 100 travelers, 100 guests. And I've been fortunate that I have always worked in this space that's, the smaller operations. And I think there's a place for the larger ships, but I'm not terribly personally interested. So that's important. The flip side is, there aren't many ships that are smaller, like, say 40 or 50 or less. Some of them, there are a few. Most of them are really just like eye-wateringly expensive. And because nowadays, if you build a new ship, and you build it for, you have to pay for it effectively. And the way you pay for it is, if it's a small ship, is you build it so that you charge people, $3,000 a day, something like that. So that's an issue. Once you are charging that much, I find that the clientele tends to be, sure, you get folks that are super keen, but it's mostly going to be about, long dinners with lots of fanciness. And I'm like, yeah, good dinner is important, but long time in Antarctica is what's really important to me.
Yeah.
So you can go down there by yacht, and that's a cool way to get out. Like, if you want to go and mountaineer in Antarctica, that's awesome. Do that by some kind of yacht-based operation, or you fly into the continent. It's a whole different way to go. To me, we have landed on and operate around the best way to see the most wildlife. And that's this size of ship, small, but not so small that we can't get places, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Sounds like the perfect size.
Yeah. And what would you say is like, so tourism in Antarctica has become more popular since you first started going there. So has there been any changes that have been real noticeable for you as like an operator and leader?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in the 90s, there was a certain cowboyishness of like, well, let's just figure it out, right? And was that always safe? Maybe not, and I think, I mean, there was a strong emphasis among leaders on being like, the super rugged and ready kind of folks, whereas now there's more of an emphasis on safe, environmentally responsible operations, right? So when I plan and execute a trip, my goal is to like keep the feeling of wilderness while realizing that we're not the only people there, so we can't just go tromp wherever, right? I feel like 30 years ago, if we all think now about the concept of kind of cumulative impact, right? If one person walks through a penguin colony, I mean, you're going to disturb birds, and that's not cool. But if that happens day after day after day, you're starting to get to a really bad place in terms of the impact on the colony. So yeah, we have guidelines for just about every landing site, and we'll operate within those guidelines. We call them guidelines, but at the end of the day, they're effectively standard operating procedures. They're effectively rules that limit how we work. Some of the basics that are uniform, maximum 100 people ashore at a time. So cool. That's our whole operation within that. Certainly strong operational policies around how we work around whales, right? I was just giving a talk to expedition staff across the industry as part of a workshop a couple days ago. Was it yesterday? 2 days ago. To basically, like, with this concept, like, let's not change the whale's behavior, but let's let the whale's behavior change us, physically and emotionally. And the whole way we build this is like, there's this, you guys haven't seen it yet. The field operation manual, it is no longer measured in pages, but it's now like 1,500 pages. And you'll and you will be tested on it, right?
Yeah.
And it's not tested like, okay, memorize this whole thing and then answer questions. It's an open book test. The point of it is that and you understand the context of how are we operating, like what, okay, this site has been determined that that's a sensitive area because there's giant petrels nesting over there, and giant petrels, like, they will spook off of their nests when people approach within 100 meters. But over here, it's Gentoo penguins, and the rule is maximum, do not approach them within 5 meters. But I mean, find me a 10-meter circle on land that doesn't have a penguin in it, right? Good luck. So it's all this, like, how do we operate as humans when the rules say this? Sometimes we have to say, oh, the rules say we can do this, but look, that's not cool. Other times the rules by the letter, it's this, but functionally, we go ashore and we're within 5 meters of a penguin. You walk slow, you don't disturb them. These are things that, like, we're a lot more organized than we used to be, so that we can preserve the wilderness feeling, give people as much freedom as possible within the bounds of, these are the bounds of safe and responsible operations. Within that, be free and enjoy yourself. Don't push those bounds, because if you push those bounds, we'll have to bring them in, and then you're on a shorter leash, and it's like, I want people to be off leash, but know the limits,
Mhm.
And I feel like people respond to that, it's like, share respect. We just think about it a lot more, really. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
You have to be.
you have the benefit of having like a already inclined audience, like they're already nature enthusiasts. So if you give them a set of parameters to not disturb the nature, they're that kind of crowd that's going to be receptive to that. It's not like, someone who just happened to drive through Yellowstone and walk right by a bison.
I mean, we don't really have people that are like, hey, I want to go sit on an iceberg with a leopard seal and get my picture taken, right? Or like, thankfully, the Darwin Awards usually they don't go with a but,
So we can't put our toddler on the back of a Waddell seal or
Only sea lion.
Oh, did you see that video?
a leopard seal. Yeah, totally.
That video is
Did
horrible.
you see that?
Oh, that was terrifying.
Man,
That happened with a California sea lion like last
If
week.
it grabbed her head, she's out.
Oh, she would have been done.
Oh,
So scary.
But,
So scary. All right, Ted, let's get to the meat and potatoes. What are some of your favorite moments in Antarctica over the years? We want to hear them all, but I don't know how much time we have for all of them. So
maybe let him
All
do
of
I want to hear
like
the last
two.
30 years.
God
I
love.
want 6 encounters every year for the past 30 years.
Yeah.
Go.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like when the loudest thing in the world is a humpback whale blowing, you know, and it's just silent other than that, you know,
Yeah.
it's just the silence. I love that space where it's like it's this incredibly water dominated world, right? Where you're on the water, there's bergs all around, the mountains are just massive, but they are completely covered by ice. So like all you see is water, you know, in multiple forms, and then you know, penguins are porpoising along, or you know, your minke whale comes up, and yeah, just that space where it's like it's silent, and then there's the animal there. That's my favorite. Single. Yep. I'll go with that.
Nice.
Do you have any like memorable moments of that, or
I'll go with the second one too, though. So like when I last year I joined a voyage as expedition staff, and my mom had, I'll try to say this without breaking up. My mom had passed away. Like I was like, am I going? Am I not going? My mom was super sick. And it was that whole like, you know, no idea how long she was gonna last. And then she passed. And her happy place, many happy places for her, but being on the bridge wings among albatross that was just such a happy place. So yeah, I mean, just standing out there and having, you know, like Mantle City albatross cruise by, or wandering a royal albatross, and with each new species as we left, you know, from leaving well, that voyage we came out from Punta Arenas and then went up north and around. So, you know, traveling out off of the continental shelf of South America and then into the Drake, and just with each new species it picked up, there's just this huge, just this like, you know, a little bit of my mom's spirit on the wing. But yeah, you know,
For
it's
sure,
just
absolutely.
a big wilderness, you know, and there's nothing, I mean, without, you know, above water, there's no more foreign space on this planet. I love that. I just love that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're very excited. So we're glad that you had some time to chat with us and help get the hype up, because we're really excited to go, and hopefully a few people want to join us, or at least get to follow along with us afterwards when we get back and see all the cool things that we saw. So
Bring on the whale nerds. Yeah. I mean, just the experience of being out with you guys in Monterey Bay that last was in October, I think it was.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. I hope some of your crew joins. It'll such good folks. So yeah.
yeah, they really were. They really are.
Cool.
awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening in, and you can learn more about the trip through the Cheeseman's website, which we've been linking to our social media stuff. You can see it on our email blasts, and we will share more of it, I'm sure, throughout the rest of the summer, because we're so excited. And you can follow along with us on social media at Whale Nerds. Cheeseman's, do you know what the handle is? Cheeseman's, is it Ecology Safaris, the whole thing?
Yeah.
On
There's an underscore.
No, there's no underscore.
Guess we
me
should
and
look
my
it up.
aptitude with
I mean,
Facebook.
the ecology
Yeah.
safaris.
Yeah,
All one
Cheeseman's
word.
Ecology Safaris. They have social media too.
Thank
They
you.
post cool photos, videos. They have YouTube channel, so you can follow along with both of us. And yeah,
We'll tag it.
thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Awesome. You guys are
Thanks
great.
for coming out, Ted. Appreciate it.
Cheers.